You're listening to Ruminating with RealAg, the podcast that chews on the latest in beef production, with your host, Amber Bell.
This is Ruminating with RealAg, and I'm your host, Amber Bell. For today's episode, I'm really excited to be speaking with Bryan Luthi of Luthi Ranch. Luthi Ranch is a sixth-generation family ranch based out of Wyoming. And Bryan first caught my eye due to his YouTube channel. So his YouTube channel is Luthi Ranch, and he is doing a lot of different unique things, implementing different ways of doing things, and it's catching people's attention. So I am excited for this conversation. I hope you are too. And welcome, Bryan. It is wonderful to be speaking with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, so you are down in Wyoming.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about the location, about your ranch, because you are running Luthi Ranch down there with your family. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we run Luthi Ranch down here. I've got a pretty big family, but it's mostly me and my dad that run it. Then, my siblings will come and help us whenever they have an opportunity. But for the most part, it's my dad and I have a brother that's pretty involved also. And so, yeah, we're here in Wyoming, western Wyoming. We're right along the Idaho border. So there's actually a little county road that kind of divides our ranch. So on one side of the road is actually Idaho, and the other side of the road is Wyoming. So we're on both states there.
That's fun. I have a friend who's in Lloydminster, Alberta, Saskatchewan. And Lloydminster is a city that is right in between two provinces. So, yeah, very similar.
Yeah. Yep.
That's fun. And you run cattle.
Yep, we do. Yeah, we run mostly beef cattle. Well, that's all we do now is beef cattle. We mostly do Black Angus, some Red Angus in there, a lot of Hereford crosses. That's kind of what we have and stick to.
Great. And how many head are you running?
So between my dad and I, we run about 165 head.
Okay. And it's cow-calf?
Yep, cow-calf.
Okay. That's enough to keep you busy then.
It is. Yeah, it's enough to keep us busy for sure. But it doesn't seem to be quite enough to keep me here full time. So, I've got an off-farm job, and it seems like a lot of people are in the same boat doing off-farm jobs to, make ends meet.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and you guys are 6 generations on your property, is that right?
Yeah, so I am currently the 5th generation. Then, our kids, if they decide to, they want to be a part of it and take things over, they'd be the 6th. And I don't know if you've watched some of our videos, you've probably seen Ellis, my son in them, or my daughter Stevie. So they would be the 6th if they decided to be involved, or if any of my other siblings had kids that want to be involved, that would be the 6th generation. So.
That's incredible and quite the legacy.
Yeah. So, I guess if you're interested in kind of the history of our place here, so the Luthi family is originally from Switzerland, and they immigrated over here to the States in late 1800s, like 1880, 1890, and they ended up here in Star Valley, and I believe it's 1890 when they ended up here. And yeah, they ended up homesteading and buying up some other, land around them, and that's how we've gotten the place here now.
So what are you passionate about when it comes to farming? What gets you really excited and wanting to get up in the morning?
I enjoy how different every day can be. Dealing with the livestock or the machinery or the putting up hay, the crops, there's always something different to keep you interested in what's going on. So I really enjoy that. And just being part of a farming community, it's hard to beat that. Having neighbors that are in the same boat as you, it's just, it's something special. I know a lot of people don't get to have that opportunity. So I really enjoy that, just the community aspect of it also.
Definitely. And you touched a little bit about your YouTube channel. So I do want to kind of bring up that. So what sparked it? Because you have quite the number of subscribers on your YouTube channel. It's impressive.
It's kind of funny because I guess it depends on who you compare yourself to, Yeah, I watch a lot of these bigger YouTubes and they got tons of subscribers, and I compare myself to them. I don't have very many. But what started it mostly was when I first started getting into growing our own herd, like my wife and we focused a lot on the custom beef. So selling direct to the consumer. And I just thought it'd be neat to give our customers the experience of kind of going through the whole process with us, kind of watching their beef grow, and just watch us how we went through the process and everything. Just the amount of effort it takes to get that beef from the calf to the plate, because if you're not involved in agriculture, you don't realize, the amount of time and effort it takes to complete that whole cycle.
Right. I was reading some statistics today that say in North America, while close to 90% of people trust their farmer, there's like 1 in 5 trusts the agricultural food systems.
Oh,
So I think that that speaks to
yeah.
that, right? Not knowing
Yep.
where your food's coming from. That's amazing. So are you guys still direct marketing?
Yes, yeah, we do. We don't do everything direct marketing, but usually I'll keep, five or six steers back from the ones that we raise just to direct market. And so it's not a huge part of what we do, but it's definitely a part of it.
Hmm. Okay, and so you obviously grew up farming with that
Yep.
as a background. But you come up like from looking at your videos, you come up with some pretty unique ways of trying new things. Like, and I noticed your welding videos especially kind of
Okay.
have
Yeah.
taken off, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you look at? Like, what's your thinking process when coming up with a solution to one of the problems you experience on the ranch? Maybe with an example, that'll help out.
Yeah. I guess a lot of the things that I do here when it comes to welding, I get a lot of inspiration just from mostly other YouTube videos or just finding stuff online. Oh, like I see something online, like, oh, that would be cool to do it, that way. I just put my own little twist on it. And that's kind of how I've gotten into some of them welding videos on like building those freestanding panels, the sucker rod and oil filled pipe panels to one of my most popular videos was just me saddling pipe, how I do that with a chop saw. And that was kind of that's how I created that video because I was trying to figure out how to saddle the pipe on my own end. So I just went online and kind of seen how other people are doing it and kind of made it into the process I wanted to do it. And so,
Do you
yeah.
think more people are using sort of a do-it-yourself idea probably than they would have in, let's say, our parents' or grandparents' generations?
I don't know if I'd say more because I feel like the older generation were very self-sufficient. They didn't
Hmm.
really have the options on not being self-sufficient. But I think nowadays that you definitely have the better opportunity to do it yourself just because of the all the instruments that we have before us, YouTube.
Hmm.
I think YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, so it's so easy to get on YouTube and say, "Hey, how do I do this or how do I do that?" And so it makes it pretty easy to, figure out on your own how to do whatever you're trying to figure out how to do.
Each thing. Yeah, I know even just making a chicken feeder. I was
Oh,
looking at
yeah.
like you go into PV Mart or UFA, our feed stores and chicken feeders are like 60 or $70 up here in Canada. And I
Oh,
just
yeah.
can't see it. So I'm like, hey, YouTube showed me you can use a pail and just drill out some holes in the bottom and put a pan around it. Like,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things like that that I think have changed the way we're doing things. Do you
Yeah.
see a role? So, because we talk about Google or YouTube, but I was actually just reading something where I think it's FBN have come out with a new AI search engine where you can ask it any type of agronomy questions.
Oh,
And I
okay.
played around with it. And do you think that that might be what we're looking at in the future?
You know, maybe I could see something like that. Just the amount of data and everything that's being collected online, it would make sense that things would go that direction. Just being maybe having an easier way to access what you're looking for.
Hmm. Yeah, the asking question things is really interesting. So let's get down to production practices because that's what a lot of your videos are.
Hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about what your day to day looks like. Like, what does calving look like for you guys?
So calving's a pretty intense experience for us here, just because of when we do it. So if you've watched some of our videos, we usually start calving the first part of February,
Hmm.
and our climate here, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's colder than where you guys are, but I'd say it's probably fairly similar. So we're at 6,000 feet elevation. So seeing the 30, 40 below days is, it can happen. It's, in the snows here, we got snow on the ground for 6 months of the year on a normal year. So yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of your time. Just depend on if I have to go to work or not. I'll go out there and try to check, every 2 or 3 hours and just try to keep an eye on things on how they're progressing. And um, yeah, I mean, anybody that's dealt with cattle and calving knows how intense that can be. And the focus it needs.
It's a lot. So why do you guys choose winter calving?
So pretty much the only reason I choose to calve in the winter is because we have range permits. So I don't know if they have the same type of program up in Canada. So, but with the range permit is we're allowed to pretty much rent Forest Service land, and those range permits they start on the 6th of June, and so it's just you could calve a little bit later in the year, like into March and April, but we just find that calving in February, like we do, uh, things are still frozen. The ground's
Hmm.
still frozen, and you're not getting into the mud and the filth that the spring months bring. And so that's why we like calving when we do, just to try to avoid the mud and all the the standing water and whatnot that comes with the springtime. And then with us calving in February, that gives our calves a decent amount of time to get some size on them before they go up on the forest, and then it also gives us a chance to breed our cows back to our bulls. And I don't know if you watched one of the videos I did about why we calve when we do calving in
Hmm.
February, but I've kind of timed things out and laid things out where I turn the bulls out about April 25th. And so that gives our cows 2 cycles with our bulls before they go up on the forest.
Right.
And so I think we get better breed back just because, our cows are in a confined space. Well, not confined space, but, 10, 20 acre pasture where it's easy enough to get them bred back. Because once they go on the forest, I mean, that's thousands of acres. And if they go up there not being pregnant, there might be a chance that the bulls don't find them throughout the summer, and then you get the open cows come fall.
Right. And do you guys have, so we do have grazing leases and community pastures and such
Hmm.
out here. So is it more like a community pasture, or are your cattle the only ones on that piece?
So where we're at, I guess it'd be more of a community pasture. We're mixed in there with about 5 other families.
Oh, okay.
So I think, I believe the permits up there where we are is 600 head,
Hmm.
and we're 160 of that. So there's a lot of other cows and families up there along with us.
So turning bulls out could be difficult too if you're trying to do your own breeding lines.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if they're not bred by the time they go up there, it's
There'll
whoever's
be another
full.
bull.
It's yeah, yep, it's a free for all.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really interesting. We are going to be doing an episode also on winter calving and spring calving
Okay.
and figuring out exactly why people do what they do. Myself, my background is all spring calving, like May,
Hmm.
June. So
Okay.
it's nice and warm out, and
Oh yeah.
I've never fully understood. I'm like,
Yeah.
why? I would hate to get up every 3 hours, but
No,
that
I
makes a lot of sense then.
no, I get jealous because if we didn't have these range permits, I wouldn't calve in February because it's just
No.
it's hard to do, and I'd much rather calve in May and June, where it's not such an intense, all-encompassing, endeavor.
Right,
So
right. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing is there's a reason why each operation operates the way that they do, right?
yeah.
So what about winter feeding? What do you guys do for winter feed?
So it's kind of evolved over the years. So I came back to the ranch and got really involved probably 2016, 2017. And when I first came back, I only started off with 10 head of cows. And so when I was feeding back then, I was just dumping bales in the bale feeder, in a feeder, and that was that. I'd feed every, 2 or 3 times a week and didn't have
Hmm.
to worry about it. But as I've grown my herd, mine and my wife's herd more and more, we've had to be a little bit more, um, not strict, but planned out on our feed. So anymore, we pretty much feed every day, and we feed the exact amount that herd needs for the day. Breaking it
Right.
down by a per calf basis, and so that's kind of where we're at now is everyday feeding and just feeding the exact amount that the herd needs for that day.
Okay. Have you tried any out wintering or is it all pen feeding?
So like I said, we're in pastures, and we do depend on what time of the year we are. Like if it's before calving, we'll just feed out on the hay fields and just run the bales. So depending on what kind of bale we're feeding, if we're feeding square
Hmm.
bales, we'll just pitch it off the wagon and just do a line, and the cows will just go out through the fields and eat that way. But as we get closer to calving season, we kind of get a little bit closer to the shelters and that, and a bit more confined space.
Hmm.
And I did listen to that episode of yours about the overwintering,
Oh,
I think it
wintering?
was
Yeah.
called. Yeah, that was very interesting. I really enjoyed that one. And um, I've thought about the bale grazing side of things, and I like the idea of it a lot. And listening to that, I've never been around it much, but it does sound like there's maybe a little bit of waste that goes along with it, like hay that gets trampled into the ground.
Yeah, so like we talked about in that episode, it's really interesting because bale grazing, like it works really well, especially if you are have a good experience with electric fencing, have an
Hmm.
idea of what you're doing with it. So we would typically feed 3 to 4 days at a time
Yep.
worth of bales, and we'd have that calculated out. And then on the last day, so part of the problem is that the cows are pregnant, right? We
Hmm.
want to make sure they have an even plane of nutrition. So on the last day, we'd go and unroll a good quality bale so that they
Hmm.
are getting good quality, because otherwise they won't. And then we'd force them to clean up a little bit, as long as it's not freezing cold, or,
Yeah.
if conditions are good for it, force them clean up. So we never found like there would be waste, but the amount of regrowth that you get the next year
Hmm.
is just crazy. I have video footage of flying over bale grazing sites,
Yeah.
and it's like big green circles all
Oh
throughout the
yeah.
field. So it's definitely interesting. The first time you do it, it would be a little bit nerve-wracking.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's an interesting way of doing feeding.
Yeah. No, I really, like I said, the concept of it interests me a lot because even just feeding the way we do, you can see the difference in the regrowth. Like you can see almost where the line was where you're feeding through the winter. Like just
Hmm.
like we have this slough pasture right here in front of our house, and like over the winter, I had maybe a 5 acre piece that I was feeding on, and you can see pretty definitively where you're feeding at. Like it's so much greener. There's like little patches of tall grass, and
So
oh, go ahead, sir.
if you're feeding out on some of the land, then if you decide like some of the hayland, let's say, do you ever choose to do it on parts that might be weedy or not growing as well? Like, do you intentionally put the
Yeah,
feed out there?
yeah. So just this last winter, so we have some center pivots in some of our hay grounds, and we focus on feeding on those corners that don't get the irrigation, just to try to get
Perfect.
that little bit more nutrients and the manure on that those sections of ground. And um, yeah, so we do try to focus on some of the ground that needs it more. Within
Hmm.
reason. Like we're not going to go 5 miles this way just to put a little bit of hay on, but within reason, we try to do that.
Right. That's amazing. And so speaking of hayland, you do your own hay. And that's something
Yep,
I have
we
no
do.
experience with whatsoever.
Okay.
So what is the decision process? Like, have you guys always done your own hay, or was there a time when you're like, yeah, we should try this?
So we've always done our own hay, and I think the reason for that is so the area I'm in is called Star Valley, and up until the late 1990s, it was a huge dairy community. Everybody here had milk barn, milking 50 to 100 head of cows, and so that's what I was born into was the dairy side of things. And I mean, everybody back there just put up their own hay, and so we're still using that same equipment from back in the 90s.
Cool.
So as we've kind of getting to the point where we might have to replace some equipment, I have started looking into what it would cost to just have somebody come and custom do it. Because
Hmm.
I mean, you look at the price of some of the new equipment, like man, that's a lot of money,
A lot of money.
and not just to mention the money, but the time it takes you to do it on your own. Well, you could think about like I could be doing something else instead of being sitting in a tractor. So there's an opportunity lost, like almost of doing it yourself. Also, just the amount of time it takes. But we do, like I said, we do put our own hay, and it's because we have the equipment to do it just from when we were a dairy farm. And I think as we have to start replacing equipment, I I'm really trying to track our numbers and see which way would be the way to go for us. Like
Hmm.
I don't know if we can justify buying some of the new equipment for the amount of land that we're running.
Right. Are there any neighbors in your area that would work with you and maybe, come
There
together to get
is,
equipment?
well, I don't know about coming together to get equipment together, but we have some neighbors that run quite a bit of ground that
Hmm.
just focus solely on producing hay. They don't have any cows or anything. And so that's crossed my mind like, oh, maybe we just hire this family to put up our hay for us. And because they've got the nicer equipment, and they can do it a lot faster than we can. So,
Right.
that's another thing too. And so that's crossed my mind quite a bit.
That makes sense. And do you guys run any crops? I don't know if I saw anything about crops.
So we don't really do much of crops, but besides, alfalfa and grass mixes. That's pretty much
Hmm.
all we do. Um, we do a little bit of three-way, four-way mixes with the wheat, the barley, the oats, and the peas. But we
Oh,
just
cool.
we just cut it for hay.
Hmm.
There's some guys around us that still do some barley and combine it, but not a whole lot anymore. A lot of people, when they rotate their alfalfa fields or grass fields, they go to that three or four-way mix.
Right. So you guys have a lot of pasture land around you then.
A fair amount, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'd say most of what people farm around here is alfalfa, and then the alfalfa grass mixes.
That's incredible. Our area up here is almost all grain land.
Okay.
And yeah, you rarely see someone take their land out of grain and
Hmm.
put it into forages. So
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to
Well,
see.
yeah, and I know as you travel through the valley, there's still plenty of people that just do like barley farming,
Hmm.
and but I'd say the majority of people put up hay is what happens around here. And I don't know if I think it's more because of the growing seasons around here. I don't know if they're too short to get too involved with the some of the crops.
Right. Well, it's
And
expensive too. Like speaking about equipment expense, like
mhm.
cropping is
Oh yeah,
really high up there. It's crazy.
yeah.
Um, and so what does rejuvenating your pastures look like? Do you do a lot of broadcasting seed or
So when we rotate out of certain crops, I
hmm.
think we're probably more traditional on that aspect, probably carrying some of the dairy side of things with us as we've left that. But we would usually plow it up and rotate it to like so let's say we have a field that's alfalfa and it's really starting to peter out. We'll go in there and plow it up and go to that three or four way mix for 3 or 4 years and then plant it back into usually a grass alfalfa mix.
And then so and you are running with your family and working a full-time job, I'm guessing, outside of that as well.
Yeah, so I work for a trucking company called Old Dominion, and
Hmm.
luckily it's just a part-time thing, but
Oh, good.
my hours can be all over the place depending on how much freight comes up into the valley. So, I mean, some weeks it's a full-time job, 40, 50 hours a week, but then other weeks it's only a couple of days. And it's been a great fit for me here because they're pretty flexible with me on
Hmm.
um, when I can work and when I can't. And like let's say I have to do something in the morning, they're usually pretty flexible with having me like have a morning off and go in later and run a route. And
Oh,
so
good.
yeah,
Because that's what I was gonna ask. Like, how do you juggle that? And I mean, just keeping all the balls up in the air, right? Like, there's a lot
yeah,
going on.
yeah. No, they like I said, they're really good, flexible with me. And I before I had this job, I worked at another company and it wasn't flexible and it was a lot
Hmm.
more hours. It was depending on the season. Like if it was summer, it was 60 or 70 hours a week. There wasn't any flexibility. It was 6 days a week. And when we had our first son, when we had our first kid, Ellis, I quit that job and I eventually got into this one with Old Dominion just because of the work life balance with the other job and just trying to, as you know, juggle everything else and throwing kids into the mix. Like there wasn't enough time in the day to do everything that I'd like to get done. So this one's
Right.
been a
And
great fit so far.
do you take your kids out farming with you a lot?
Yeah, I try
Oh,
to.
working.
Like Ellis is getting to the age where he can come tag along quite a bit more. So he's 3.5 right now. So he's getting to the point where I can bring him with me. Like our daughter Stevie, she's just a year old, so she doesn't come out
A
too
little too
much.
little for it still.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what innovations have made it so that you can bring kids along? Because I mean, I've brought kids along on the ranch before, and I know it can slow things down a lot. So, have you
oh
come up
yeah.
with any ways to structure that?
Um, I don't know if I've come out with any ways to structure that. I know they, they do slow you down a lot. I guess you got to be patient and just realize I'm not going to get quite as much done today as I was hoping, but it's worth it, being able to bring him along with us and have him tag along. Uh, I know one of the things that's really helped us out here is we bought a side by side a couple years ago, and that's
Hmm.
been a game changer for bringing kids along and my wife also. just if we're fixing fence or checking cows, we can do it together in the side by side. And
Right.
it,
And how much time do you spend fixing fence? Actually, I
uh,
should ask, like, how much fence do you have? That's probably.
so yeah, well, on our ranch here, I don't know exactly how many miles of fence we have, but I'd imagine we've got at least 10 miles of fence that we
Mhm.
maintain. And then this summer, I actually did the range fence. So I put a bid on that this summer, and I was up there fixing fence on the forest all summer too. And there's 14 miles of fence up there that I was doing. And so, I mean, between that and our own stuff, yeah, there's probably 20
It's
miles of
busy.
fence. Yeah.
And how far away is the rangeland?
So we're really lucky with our location here, and from where we start in the summer with our grazing permits, we're only about 4 miles. So
Okay,
we're
that's
actually
nice.
able to drive the cows up there to start the
Hmm.
grazing in the summer. We don't have to truck them or anything.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
And the same,
handy.
yeah, and the same thing when we get done in the fall, we end up in another canyon a little bit north of us, and same thing, about 4 miles or so. So a
Hmm.
great location for us.
That's incredible. And going back to your YouTube channel, so you have a lot of innovative videos. What are some of the things that you have found have made life just so much easier?
Um, well, definitely having good tools. Like when I started getting into the welding side of things, I tried to make sure I had some good tools that were high quality. I think
Hmm.
that helps out a lot. And just just going back to the YouTube side of things, it's just neat getting on there and seeing how other people are doing things or how they're building certain things, how they're setting up their corrals, or how they're taking on this project. And I guess that's probably one of the best things that I like to do is just try to get inspiration from so many other people on whatever project I have going on to kind of tie it all together and customize
Right.
it.
Yeah, that helps. Who do you follow?
Um, well, I really like following Farmer Tyler Ranch. That's probably
Okay.
one of my go-to guys. I don't know if you've watched him or not.
I
He's a guy
haven't.
based out in he's in California, runs a small ranch on his family's place, and um, I like watching Sunny Farms. I'm not sure how they pronounce it, but I think they're over in Nebraska, South Dakota, maybe. Um, then when it comes to metalworking, I really like watching Aaron Ross. He has a welding channel, and he does a lot of pipe fence and a lot of entryways to ranches, and so I like following him too.
That's awesome. My partner is a welder, and
Okay.
yeah, I watch the work that you guys do, and I'm just like, that's amazing.
No, there's
I
there's
don't
some
have
good
the patience for it.
no, there's some good welders out there that's fun to watch and yeah, getting
Definitely.
inspiration from them.
And then one of your other videos, and this one I was really excited about because I have a friend at the University of Toronto who studies grass-fed meat.
Hmm.
And so I really enjoyed watching your grass-fed versus grain-fed video
Okay, yeah.
and the reactions on it. And so what kind of inspired that and what has you curious about the different feeding methods?
So that video is probably inspired just from the custom beef side of things with us direct marketing to the consumer. I was curious too on just if I could taste the difference. So
Hmm.
I wanted to do that experience on my own just to really see if I could taste the difference and see the difference, like how different the meat looked and the taste quality and just the whole process of it.
Right. Does your family get excited about these things as well?
Uh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Probably not as excited as I get, but they're definitely so supportive, especially my wife. She's always gung ho for whatever idea we might have, or definitely
Especially
pushing
when it
me.
means sampling different types of
Oh
steak.
yeah, yeah, she loves that.
You can't go
No,
wrong there.
yeah,
Yeah, Dr. Richard Vazanet, though, has done some pretty cool fatty acid profile studies on
okay.
grass-fed beef and the omega-3s in them, which is really neat. Do you find that your customer base, like that helps with your customer base when you're speaking with them?
Yeah, because we've got quite a few returning customers, and they want either grass finished beef or they prefer the grain finished. So, like I said, I like doing that experiment just to be able to relate with them more to maybe see why they wanted this one and not the other one, and kind of get the taste down.
So are you
So,
guys doing all grass-fed now, or do you feed grain throughout the winter?
To the cows or to the so we
To
don't feed any or to
the
the steers or
yeah.
so like I said, we give the customers the option on what they want. Like so once we get to the point where they're going to either be a grass-fed animal or a grain-finished animal, I try to get my customers lined up beforehand so I know how many I should do grass-finished and how many I
Of
need to
both.
do grain-finished. Because even if we do the grain-finished side, like we only feed them grain for 3 or 4 months at the most,
Hmm.
along with the all the hay and alfalfa that they can eat. So the grain's more of a supplement more than the total feed. And
Right.
then yeah, with the grass finished, it's yeah, we just feed them grass and that's what they get.
And has there been a learning curve as you've done grass fed? Because I know that's one of the things is, they finish slower and so.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm still pretty new at the whole custom side of things. So, I try to, well, it's funny because I try to take samples from every animal that we do. I joke with the customers that it's their delivery fee. Like, hey, I'll deliver your beef for you. Just give me, 2 ribeyes so I can do some quality control here. And so
I
that's
like
kind of,
it.
yeah. And so it's been neat to see, like, as we do things a little bit different, like how that affected the meat. Like if we kept the animal a little bit longer, or
Hmm.
if we had on grain for a little bit longer. So that's been kind of neat to see that side of things.
Right. And so speaking about that video, because I don't think you actually got into the details on how much grain the grain-fed animal had had. So was that the same? Like it was just kind of supplemented a little bit through a couple months?
Yep. And so when we start them off on the grain, like I said, we usually give them grain for about 3 or 4 months, and we ease them into it. So like I might start them off with a 5 pound mix, and I just measure things with coffee cans. So one coffee can, I think I measured it once, weighed it out. Like one coffee can was 4 pounds. So then
Hmm.
as I get further and further like into it, within 2 or 3 weeks, I've got them at the full ration that I give them, which isn't much more than 16 pounds, I believe. 16, 20 pounds is about where I'm at,
Oh,
if I
great.
remember right. But then, yeah, like I said, on top of that, just all the hay and alfalfa they can eat for everything else.
Right. And you guys did notice that actually, even looking at those steaks, you could tell the difference just looking at them. The color was
Yeah,
different.
it was surprising. Like you could just by looking at it, the difference in the color and the marbling and just how the fat stood out a little bit more on the one side and not the other.
Hmm. And how active is your dad in trying these new things?
Oh,
Or yeah, how does
uh,
that work? Because I know that that can always be a little bit of a problem when
yeah.
it comes to generational, decisions.
I mean, he's always supportive of me. He's not super active in the trying the new things. I usually have to convince him, like, oh, I'm going to try this, Dad, or I want to try this. And I don't know if this is more of a like the father-son relationship, like where
Hmm.
the son, the younger guy wants to try something new, and the dad's, well, we've always done it this way. Let's do it this way because that's what I like to do.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah.
even with the YouTube channel, it's been kind of funny just trying to because it's it can be pretty awkward doing the filming side of things because for the most part I'm usually all by myself when I'm filming. But if my dad's around or I got siblings, you're almost a bit embarrassing sometimes. Like, I don't want to pull out this camera and start talking to it. So it's been kind of been kind of fun to get my dad more involved with that. He doesn't want to be on the camera much, but he doesn't mind
Hmm.
being in the shot or whatnot. He doesn't talk. He doesn't really ever talk much to the camera, but so that's been
That's
kind of fun
fantastic.
to involve him with that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the things that I think almost every farmer anywhere has a problem with the whole succession thing. Like it's kind of like,
Yeah,
okay, well, I want to try some new stuff. So that's amazing that you guys have a good working relationship with it because it can be a struggle.
yeah.
And is there anything that you want to tell people, any like encouragement that you're like, hey, get out there and try new things or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for sure. I mean, I think what's led to at least our YouTube success is just getting out of your comfort zone for sure. Because I'm a pretty, if you actually meet me, I'm pretty introverted, pretty reserved person. So to go out there and actually film myself and make a video out of it was a pretty big obstacle for me to overcome. Just because, like I said, I'm pretty reserved and introverted, and I didn't want to be putting myself out there like that. But I'm like, well, I'll give it a try. Why not? And like I said, it's kind of grown since then.
And you must enjoy
So
it.
I do. I've grown to enjoy it quite a bit now, and the way I look at it now too is it's almost like I'm keeping a family journal too, because now that my
Hmm.
kids are getting involved and my wife's involved, it'll be fun to look back in 20 years and oh, remember how small Ellis was or how young we were, talking to my wife, and so it'll be kind of fun to
That's
look back on
exciting.
things.
I think it really inspires people too that are looking into coming into agriculture for the first time, which
Hmm.
there are statistics saying that the majority of people that are first-time farmers are people who've never farmed, don't have a family history of farming,
Yeah,
and they're young people that are starting up. So it's neat to have people like you that are willing to show, what day-to-day life looks like because people don't know, and it's great.
yeah. Well, it's been kind of interesting just to see how much interest there is out there for it. Like,
Hmm.
like a farming channel wouldn't grow unless there's people interested in watching farming. So there's interest out there for it. And I know the homesteading thing's getting pretty big on YouTube. Like, people are interested in this side of life, growing your own food, just the whole, I guess, getting back to the land type of thing with the homesteading. And so there's definitely an interest out there for it.
They really are. It's fantastic. Well, I really thank you for your time, Brian. It was wonderful getting to meet you.
Oh yeah,
Um,
me too. Thank you.
and that was Bryan Luthi on Ruminating with Real Egg.